Hello, everyone. We're going to let a couple more folks in and then we'll go ahead and get started. We are really excited for the speakers that we have today, invited by our residents. And so we are looking forward to this conversation. We will give people another minute to join and then we'll jump into the conversation.
Give me a second. Let me remind people in our group chat also that about the notes. 1 second.
So welcome, folks. As you're coming in, you are in social medicine rounds. We're happy to have you here. And we are going to get started in a moment. Just to orient you on the topic that we'll have, I'm sharing our screen with what we'll be focusing on today. We have Lisa Ortega and Shawn Hudson, and we are really excited to have both of them join us. And you can just see the blurb, what we're going to be talking about. We'll get started in a moment, but get comfortable. If colleagues of yours that you know would want to be here aren't here, you want to send them a note, please feel free to do so. But come in, and we will get started soon. All right, so we are going to go ahead and get started with our conversation. Welcome everyone to Social Medicine Rounds. For those who are new to Social Medicine Rounds, this is an opportunity for us to connect as staff, faculty, trainees, and as community members. We always get folks from the Bronx and folks who live outside the Bronx across the U.S. joining us for discussions around the medical, economic, and psychosocial issues that impact the health and well-being of our Bronx community. And folks join from all over the country because a lot of the topics that we cover actually have impact and kind of resonance with other communities as well. We've covered topics that range from things like what's happening with the opioid crisis, with examples of the social justice movement with the Young Lords, with conversations around the criminal justice system. And today we're going to hear from some community members around some of the work that's been happening in the Bronx. And so we are excited to have you. If you are interested in some of our previous conversations, you can check it out on the website. The Department of Family and Social Medicine website has all the archives of rounds from 2021. So I'm going to turn it over to Aquia Samuels to go ahead and introduce our speakers for today.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce our speakers today, of whom I've been able to work closely with the last few years. So first off, I'd like to start with Lisa Ortega. Lisa is a recovering addict with 32 years of clean time. She's a mother of 4 and grandmother of 5. She self-identifies as a revolutionary atheist anarchist. She has been a community organizer for 27 years in the South Bronx and has firsthand experience with the criminal justice system. In 1990, due to her addiction, Lisa found herself on Rikers Island. All of her children's fathers had extensive prison history before, during, and after their relationships. All her grandchildren's fathers also have a history of incarceration. Lisa's oldest son is currently being held hostage in prison with a 10-year sentence. This legacy of torture by the hands of the state is what propels her to fight for abolition. She believes building community together is the solution, not jails or prisons. Welcome, Lisa. Thank you for doing this. Our other speaker is her comrade, Shawn Hudson, who is 31 years old and was born, raised, and is currently living in the Bronx. He's been a grassroots political organizer for Take Back the Bronx, a radical prison abolitionist and anti-gentrification organization. For nearly 6 years. Shawn is also an award-winning self-published author, a screenwriter, and an accomplished poet. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you so much, Aquia. I'm going to go ahead and share the slides for our speakers and then turn it right over to them. And again, just really grateful for the residents from our Social Medicine Immersion Month who specifically requested, after meeting with Lisa in particular, specifically requested that we have this session to really spotlight and feature the important work that she and Shawn and others are doing. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing. Oops, excuse me. And I will turn it over to Lisa and Shawn.
Thank you. So maybe we could move forward. This is a new PowerPoint. We've never had one. So we did this for you guys. Okay. So just a little bit about, we were formed in 2011. We started off when the Occupy movement was around and we were gathering there. And I guess people from the Bronx started gravitating to each other. And the end result was that we ended up with a group that we called Take Back the Bronx out of the Occupy movement. Our work revolves around poor, working class, homeless, Black and brown people. We are guided by radical desire to establish community control. That's our main thing, control of all things. Our hoods need to be safe, inclusive, and anonymous. Our perspectives are from an abolitionist, anti-capitalist, and anti-colonial lens. And that has many layers. We use tactics such as direct actions, political education, mutual aid, and art making. We focus on building communities that focus on their needs rather than for profit for the sake of community liberation. And Shawn will do the next one.
Hey, good afternoon, y'all. So, as my comrade beautifully said, we've been around for quite a while. We've been doing our thing. So, for those that don't know, we do not, under any circumstances, fuck with politicians, because we firmly believe that politicians are just the middlemen for the elite, and they take away the autonomy and the control from our community. And a lot of times they are part of the problematic systems in which we're trying to combat and fight against. In terms of the police, we also definitely don't fuck with them, don't mess with them under any capacity, because historically, for one, they have a history rooted in slavery as slave patrol catchers. Two, they are also used as watchdogs of the states. They are paid goons. They are a legalized gang that is used historically and currently to harass, oppress, and hinder Black, brown, and indigenous people, especially poor and working class Black and brown and indigenous folks all across the globe. And we do not tolerate them. We do not fuck with them. We do not want to have anything to do with them.
Okay, next. So we come across the nonprofits, which these are things when we speak of, we don't negotiate or bend. So if we're working with other groups and other groups kind of mess with these entities, we'll either remove ourselves or find a way to have them deal with it, but we won't deal with it because we don't negotiate on this ever. So we don't deal with nonprofits, because as it says, nonprofits receive money from rich funders and sometimes get money straight from the government. The money comes with conditions that make these groups afraid to be radical. And that's just a fact. And they'll tell you that themselves, that that's accurate. Instead, they push for small changes that never really address the root causes of issues, and they never bite the hand that feeds them. Nonprofits, true to their contra-pro roots, sabotage movements and change our radical language into something palatable for their funders. So in the work that we've done, like it gets dicey, and which is why we make sure that we're building with people and community, because a lot of times nonprofits have members and they're the community. So we want to build with the membership because we want to show them and offer them something different, something other than a nonprofit, because sometimes that's all they have in the community. So they kind of hang on to that for strength. And we show them there's something different and we can also be your strength, and we do it without compromise. So it gets dicey when it comes with nonprofits. If we don't bend on it, but we will work with membership, but with their hats off. No community boards is another one, right? So community boards are puppets for the borough president and the Department of City Planning. Politicians only desire homeowners, business owners, and church pastors to run the boards. Usually that's what you'll see sitting on boards. Every now and then you'll see sprinkled in your regular run-of-the-mill person from the neighborhood, but they like people with hats and titles. So board meetings only provide a space for residents to blow off steam, but it's only an illusion of community input and agreement. They vote only on predetermined items instead of making decisions when everyone is present. So in the past, back in the day, we would go to community boards for one reason, and that was to disrupt. There has been times when we sat in on it to get information on who's who and strategize further by getting that intel and going there, but we don't believe ourselves in really sitting on a board. Back in the day, when I was part of a nonprofit, which is why I really despise nonprofits because I know how they work inside out. We had somebody that sat on a board and she got swallowed up because she was the only person there, and they really were able to corrupt her mind because she was the only one sitting in that board, and she actually ended up not being part of the group and went the other way. So we do not do community boards at all, period. Only if it's to put pressure on them. Next. You want to take this one?
Sure, I'll take this. So, are abolitionists ways of being? Abolitionists believe that crime is a majority of a consequence of the structure of society. Therefore, sorry, trying to see the screen.
It's okay.
Yeah,
you
that
could go
first
with the
part.
flow. You don't have to read it if you don't want to.
Okay,
I could
all
read
right, cool. All right, so basically, when we talk about our abolitionist ways of being, we're talking about ways of trying to redefine safety, autonomy, and community control. Currently, right now, the way things are set up, if there is a discrepancy, if there's a dispute, if there is harm committed, people rely on the NYPD and the criminal justice system and the prison system to provide them safety. But historically speaking, the police, the prisons, all they really do is perpetuate harm. They don't really solve the root causes of these issues at all. Abolition is more so of a cure, while prison reform and jail reform, police reform is more so just a band-aid on the root cause of these issues, which is white supremacy, capitalism, and patriarchy. And us as prison abolitionists, we want to go ahead and redefine that. We want to go ahead and have a community where, say, for example, if someone is dealing with domestic violence, we as a community will come up with a way to deal with that. If someone is dealing with a dispute where there's, like, say, for example, people in our communities get into fights very often and they lead to violent interactions happening. If we as a community had autonomy over it, we could find ways to de-escalate ourselves. And I'm not talking about violence interrupters, because violence interrupters, like, the stop the violence groups, to stop the gun violence groups, they are tied to the state. They have to go back and report to the state what they are talking about, what is going on in the community. So I just want to be very clear about that. Prison abolition is not tied to the state whatsoever in any way, as Lisa brought up when it came to nonprofits. It's just everyday people figuring out ways to deal with harm, to deal with conflict in a way that doesn't rely on calling the police or disappearing people in societal garbage cans, also known as jails and prisons.
And one of the things that I wanted to add, because I feel so passionate about this, is that as a society, we've lost the ability to learn how to problem solve because of the entities that control us all around. If it's not a boss, a judge, a landlord, the school, ACS, we think that we don't know how to come together and convene and figure out and solve stuff because we haven't been able to do that. They've taken that from us. So abolition has so many layers. We're working through stuff too. Like, it's difficult sometimes because people want things to be very black and white, and abolition is not that. Some people say, well, what do you do when you have someone that's a rapist and they tell you they're going to rape again and they're child molesters? What do you do with that? And like me as a parent, I get that because I believe in justified murder. And I feel like not everybody's redeemable, right? I believe not everybody can be fixed. And that sometimes you have to do what you have to do to remove harm if they're harming others, right? So that is my belief. So there's different layers to abolition, and we haven't had enough spaces and time and building to really get together and figure out what would work in this circumstance dealing with these things. And restorative justice is excellent, but there's some people who they're not going to be with that, right? Like,
Right.
what do you tell a pedophile who's a rapist? You know, how are you going to restore that? So, you know,
Right.
for me personally, as an abolitionist, these are some of the things our group is really, really interested in getting with people and figuring out some of these things together as a group, and we haven't yet had that. This picture here, if you can see, this was at the boat.
Yep.
And we had a bunch of doctors who showed their courage, and they showed up at the boat, and shit got crazy because we wanted to deliver masks to inmates that were like on the phone. We had them on the phone, and they were like sick in there, and they wanted masks. And the doctors actually showed up, and it was powerful because at the end of it, you know, whatever, the CEOs took the masks and said they gave it, but it was just it was a good feeling to be able to do that with doctors that cared enough to come out of their comfort zone and exercise their power just by wearing those white coats. And we wore white coats too, right? So we didn't invent the wheel. We did kind of like what the young lords did, you know, and it works. So, okay, next. Shawn?
Yes. So gentrification, definitely one of our biggest ops. So for those that don't know, or that mostly everybody here probably knows, like gentrification is basically the violent act of displacement. Like you see how, like I know a lot of people here have solidarity with Palestine, right? You see how over there a lot of Palestinian people, someone Israeli will come over, just come to their crib and just kick them the fuck out their own house and say it's mine now. Well, that happens every day in black and brown communities and black and brown neighborhoods, especially in ours. And a lot of times, like especially you look at places like Brooklyn, Harlem, and now the Bronx is starting to undergo its own layer of gentrification. You know, in my neighborhood in Soundview, they put the ferry over there now. Now that's going to attract more white and non-black and brown people of color to go move to the area. And a lot of times, real estate developers, moguls, landlords, they go ahead and raise the rent on poor and working class black and brown people, and they push us out of our homes and out of our communities. And not only are the people gone from the community, but so is the rich culture, so is the history being whitewashed and being erased. I personally call it ethnic Ajax because all you're doing is sprinkling something white where everything is colored and just wipe it away, you know, and it's just erasure. And also for me, you know, the reason why it's very violent is because, you know, you're forcing people to now have to move somewhere else, and they're indirectly displacing someone else. Now they're forced to move to another area. And that's where a lot of conflict starts within the communities as well, because everybody's forced to live on top of each other with limited resources. You know, so it's like gentrification is like a avalanche of oppression to me.
Okay, next.
Housing
So
justice.
again, the housing justice, you know, so we believe, I guess, I'm sure everybody on this too also believes this, that housing should be, you know, a human right, and we should not have to pay to live anywhere. Like the earth was given freely, you know, and I'm an abolitionist, but I know this, you know, like there were no names on pieces and patches of earth. It was just there, it was given, you know. So we believe that. We believe that everyone has the right to have a place to live, and that people shouldn't have to have ownership over anything to live anywhere. And it can be done because there's other places that have stuff like that where people can squat and live nicely amongst each other, and they're not paying anything, and things go well, and they manage to fix up their houses, and they manage to have people that can do the electricity and do stuff like that. Kind of a world is like really possible, and it actually exists. So we push for that. That type of life, and we're very vicious and non-apologetic when we go up against slumlords. That because it is again, it's a violence against us. So when someone brings violence to us as abolitionists, it would be an act of violence against ourselves not to retaliate, in fact, fight back for our peace. So we need to do that. Next. Shawn?
Yes, Eyes on You. So, Eyes on You was in 2022. Let's see. 2022, there was reported 19 deaths at Rikers Island, an historic high. And in 2023, there was a reported 9 deaths reported. So basically, for us, Eyes on You is comprised of myself, Lisa, some of our comrades from Take Back the Bronx, also another comrade of ours in JC, from Branch. Also, we're comprised of medical providers, community members, those who have loved ones that are currently incarcerated or formerly incarcerated, and the people who have been formerly or currently incarcerated themselves. And personally, I feel like something like this is very historic and very revolutionary, because you never, a lot of times in the prison abolitionist movement, you always hear people talk about abolishing jails, talk about abolishing police and prisons, but very rarely do you have the people themselves who are directly impacted, like those that have been locked up, those who are locked up, and the family members as well who are impacted by mass incarceration. Because as you heard in the introductions, mass incarceration is a vicious and very violent cycle that targets Black, brown, indigenous, poor and working class people. And you see it every day. And we felt like it was important to create a organ and initiative that directly attacks that, because Black and brown people were dying in 2020 during the pandemic, during the COVID-19 pandemic. They were dropping like flies literally every week, and nobody really cared. There was no mass actions, there was no mass protests. Like, I would love for that to have happened. You know, like when Lisa showed you the pictures at the boat, a lot of people didn't care about the boat because they didn't know about it. Or it's just that it's the elitist attitude people have towards the Bronx, and where they view it as disposable, and the people as disposable.
Or
which is why a lot of people didn't go to the boat to begin with. You know, yeah, Lisa,
I'm going to intersect. I'm sorry.
yeah.
Or people don't want to lose their privilege, right? And sometimes, this is why I love Eyes on You, because the doctors that do participate and do stuff, they're willing to be in a spot of uncomfortability and exercise their privilege, because you have that as a doctor. And this group is simply asking free of charge to the city. It wouldn't cost a penny to go in there and to do medical assessments, and that's not being allowed. So it is a powerful group, and we do have like the hotline. It's a little bit slow because the main person that does it, she's about ready to give birth, but the idea is that we would be able to push our way in any facility and say we demand to do medical, and make sure that they're fine. And of course, the city fights back and pushes back. So we really need doctors that are willing to push that envelope and get a little bit out of their uncomfortability zone for this, because it's possible. When there was a hunger strike last year for Palestine, I know one of the guys in Palestine did a hunger strike.
2022, yeah.
2022, it was successful. It worked, and everybody saw that. But simultaneously, there were people on Rikers doing hunger strikes too. One of our comrades also was outside Rikers in solidarity with the people in Rikers doing the hunger strike, and it was crickets, nothing, nobody. It was almost like that. Those lives were not important. So we need to take a look at that. That's it. I think, is that it? I think that might be
Yep, it is.
Thank you.
Oh, wow.
Jessica. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. So the floor is open for folks who are listening in to respond, to ask questions. I want to acknowledge that, we are in a conversation, and we really appreciate you being here, because you started off saying these are all the groups that we don't mess with. And so we appreciate you taking the time to come and share with us. And I want to acknowledge that for many people listening on the line, this is a different kind of rounds. This is a different kind of conversation, maybe than folks who are kind of in academia might be used to. But part of the whole ethos of social medicine rounds is to bring us into closer communion and closer relationship with community members and with individuals who are doing really interesting things in the Bronx. So I want to begin by kind of acknowledging that and saying a big thank you for sharing so honestly about what you all work on, what you do, and why you do it. I'll kind of start off with a couple of questions to get the conversation going and then have it open. I'm just going to quickly check to see if there's any hands up, then have it open to those who are on the line with us. So we, think and talk a lot about different kinds of social justice work. And when we've had folks come and join us, I'm often interested in kind of what led them to this journey. So I want to open it up by asking both of you, for lack of a better term, like what radicalized you? What led you to want to do this work? Was it direct experience? Was it witnessing others in your neighborhood going through things? Was it someone led you to it? I'm just curious about kind of what brought you into this space and kind of keeps you grounded in this space. And we'll go ahead and start with Lisa.
So, I was a little light-skinned Latina in a very poor area in Brooklyn, and I was the addict that he laughs because I always say light skin, right? White presenting
Yep.
light-skinned Latina. And, in my neighborhood, I was an addict at a very young age. I went through the shelter system, and I had a father who was Puerto Rican, didn't speak a lot of English, had no education. And I had a mother who had no education as well. She was had no education. So I felt doomed from the beginning. And I didn't realize that my father had a lot of skills working mechanics, but he could never get jobs because he never had certificates. But he was the best with his hands, but it didn't matter. So we were poor. I started seeing, as I'm growing up, everybody I'm affiliated with is in jail, in prison, jail, in prison. Then I end up having some kids. I end up in jail, right? I end up in the shelter system. And I just started realizing that there's have and have nots. And it was a eureka moment for me. I was like, oh my God, some people really have a lot and some people don't have nothing. Why is this? I had never saw it before. It was really simple. And that's what kind of brought me to this. And then I started seeing these nonprofits that I talk about. They were the things I grasped onto when I got out of prison, when I got out of jail. I didn't do prison, I did jail. When I got out of jail, I ended up in the Bronx through the shelter system. And I started realizing these things. And it's like the nonprofits were the only thing I had to grab onto. So they did plant the seed. They planted some sort of a seed. But then I realized it wasn't what I was looking for to really make that systematic change.
Thank you. Shawn?
Yes. So for me, it wasn't like just the one moment. It was like a combination of things that really pushed me towards the movement. It was, seeing my friends be harassed by police, seeing my stepdad being harassed numerous times. It was incidents where I was harassed by the cops as well. Um, to the point where I was like, I knew from a very early age, like these are not the people I want to sign up to be. This is not the profession I want to sign up for. And growing up in NYCHA, like you already see your resources are limited. In terms of your housing conditions. Like I'm sitting there as a kid, I'm wondering why is it that other places they have these nice buildings, they have these nice things and stores and environments in their neighborhoods, and why we don't have that in mind. It was the fact that both my parents have got felonies, and that's limited their job prospects. That's limited a lot of things, especially for their outlook on life. And for me, what really catapulted me was when I started writing one of my books, Just Us, and that's when I really started. I said, I don't want to be one of those creatives that witness a revolutionary moment but don't be a part of it, because I feel like art is definitely a tool that can be used not just as propaganda, but to shed light on the issues in which people are going through that other people can't relate to, and make people understand what we're going through. And then, meeting Lisa at what was it, the Bronx Borough president hearing when we were combating the $11 billion jail plan back in 2019. and meeting her and some of the members of Take Back the Bronx, that's what made me want to join. I was like, oh, they're used to putting the pressure on people and, you know, politicians and landlords and things like that. I never witnessed that in the Bronx growing up, really. So that's what made me really become a part of it.
That's really helpful. And I'm curious about how you feel like the 2020 COVID-19, everything that happened with kind of the racial reckoning of that time, how that impacted the work that you all did in terms of bringing people to it or away from it. Because that was a real kind of moment where everyone was kind of discovering racism, and discovering all kinds of different issues that, obviously we've known have existed beforehand. But it was a moment of national reckoning. And I'm just curious how it impacted the work that you've all were doing, and if that's continued as you've gone on.
I think for us, it gave us more respect, because we had respect before, but it gave us more street credibility because we were out there. So we started mutual aid, like real mutual aid, right? That we were collecting stuff and we were feeding people. And it was a scary time because we didn't really know. We thought this was really like, this was, oh my God, we're going to die. And we're out there and we don't care. We don't give a fuck. We're feeding our people. And like, if we're gonna die feeding our people. So people really respected the fact that we were still out there. And it helped us to build a bond, because they were like, these people are really, really about it. But I think it did help people who were sleeping to kind of wake up, like you said, and see, look, this is how they treat people. We wasn't lying. Are we so crazy now? What's your theory, Shawn? Go ahead.
Oh, I can't wait to say, because me and Lisa, we had COVID-19 at the same time. And this is before there was testing, way before there was a vaccine. Me and her was calling each other every day. Are you alive? Are you alive? Like, and literally, like, I was scared out of my mind, not for me, but more so for my mother, because she's older and I didn't want her to catch it. But like Lisa said, we were helping doing the mutual aid during that time. And like she said, it definitely increased a lot of people's respect because we're from the Bronx. We're already behind the 8 ball as it is, in the world's eyes. So we might as well go out fighting on our sword and dying on this hill. And I feel like for me, what it did in terms of open people's eyes, you got to remember during COVID-19, there was no sporting events. You couldn't go to the club. You couldn't go to them fancy ass restaurants. COVID-19 took out all the distractions that we normally had in our everyday lives. And you had to sit there and watch a Black person almost every week be murdered either by the police and George Floyd or Breonna Taylor, or you had to watch white supremacists do it. And then on top of that, our comrades being attacked at FTP4 in the Bronx, where you had the NYPD attack multiple people and injure multiple people during a curfew after the rebellion started, And I just feel like if we're going to go ahead and really change things, it's going to take people having to not only politically educate themselves, but to get involved in this fight. That's what I think we learned from 2020.
And before we move on, real quick, I want to say that it also showed people how they treat people that are incarcerated, right? Because people were dying and being left for dead. And they knew how bad it was outside, and we had access. But they were seeing what was happening inside. And I think there was a light that clicked for some people who never looked at it before, on how they were being neglected and allowed to die like that. So that was an eye opener, I think, for a lot of people.
Thank you for sharing that. We had talked about in one of our meetings, we talked about your experience, Lisa, when you took some of the residents over to Lincoln Hospital to talk about the young lords and their experience and how I think security or the police approached you and kind of like shuttled you guys along. And it did make me want to ask you about the inspiration that you felt from the young lords in terms of kind of the work that they did, how you've drawn on them or how you've used their story to do the work that you all do now.
When I went through the shelter system, right, I came from Brooklyn, so I didn't know nothing about the Bronx, but I heard about the young lords. And I said, oh my God, these people got down like that. You don't learn this in school. So already the Bronx was sexy to me. I ended up knowing some, you know, in person, knowing some of these young lords afterwards through the work that I'm doing. So they were telling me these things firsthand, stories of what they did. Theo Silvers, I worked with her arm by arm, you know, Edie Morales, a lot of them. And the inspiration was like, if they did it before, why aren't we doing it now? Like, it's here, it's accessible. Why not? You know, so that was something like, we're not inventing the wheel. We have ancestors and people that did this. So that was kind of the inspiration, like, let's do it again. And let's let Lincoln know that we can do it again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What was your inspiration, Shawn?
Ah, that day was crazy. That day was crazy because of how everything just happened so quickly. And, you know, it amazed me how some of the residents, they were like, oh my God, but that was scary. That was scary. Because that's their first encounter with NYPD or any type of law enforcement or authority figure. And I'm like, yes, it was scary. I said, you got to see a glimpse, just a glimpse of what it's like to be poor, working class, and black and brown for a day. That's what we got to go through every day when we gather in front of our buildings, or it's a group of us going anywhere. Imagine you having to live that. It's not about being an ally. You got to be an accomplice and a comrade. Like at the end of the day, this is what we live. This is what we go through every single day. Imagine you having to deal with that level of oppression and surveillance. So we just use that as a moment to remind a lot of residents of that.
And quite frankly, I think if the doctors weren't there, it would have ended differently because,
Ooh,
you know, we fight police. Like, we will fight.
yeah,
It will be
yeah,
physical. It will go down. We will
yeah.
get arrested. So I think because there were doctors there, the you know, the police. So that's to show the power that you have simply by being, simply by existing and being that. And it's so powerful. And like, you don't even have to do so much, right? Just figure out what can you do. And that little bit can do a lot when you work together with groups like us. We can do some shit. We could change stuff, you know?
I was actually going to ask you about, Shawn just used the term be more than an ally, be an accomplice, be a comrade. And I was curious because many of us are trainees, are faculty, are in the healthcare sector. And I just, I would love to just hear more about your thoughts on how individuals who maybe are challenged for time, or maybe some of this feels like really far from them, like it's hard for them to. I'll be frank with you, most of us are not going to be fighting the police, right? It's just not what's going to go down, right? And yet we want to think about how we can show up and how we can be allied to work on things like gentrification and other, socially kind of divisive issues that we know are really impacting our patients. And so I'm curious to hear more about your thoughts on what that looks like. Everything from kind of the least you can do to the most you can do. I'd love to spend a little bit of time talking about that because I think people are interested in really helping some of the work that you're all leading on.
So she was asking you to elaborate.
Oh, I thought you. Oh, I thought you.
So
He
I
was
was
asking
using
you.
Shawn's words, but I'm asking both of you. So if either of you feel
Okay.
strongly to start answering, that would be great. But I'd love to hear from both of you on what you think the
I'm gonna
healthcare
jump
sector
in.
can do.
I'm gonna jump in.
All right.
So, and then Shawn, I'm sorry, but so I think that it is true. There's a not everybody's gonna fight the police. So there's different things that can happen, and I think when you're working with a group, that you need to build with the group and find out what is it that's needed and what can you do. So with us, we have doctors that they're really great at writing letters and not templated letters that will make a difference for people who might be incarcerated, just very strong letters, showing up, being a presence, using their mouth, saying shit to people in power when you can, secretly being intel. If you know one of our targets is going to be at an event, let us know about it and leave it there. We don't tell, just let us know. Hey, you might want to know this person's going to be there. It helps us out. And, we keep everything confidential. So we have a hotline that helps, those kind of things. But just really asking and building with us on the inside to figure that out would be helpful. Go ahead, Shawn. Sorry.
Nah, I'm good. It's all good. Um, what you call it? I would say one thing. I always say this is doing skill shares. If you have the skills to, like, deal with gunshot wounds, stab, knife wounds, or asthma, sickle cell anemia, if someone's having a pain crisis when they're dealing with it, and mental health, people dealing with mental health crisis. I feel like any of those things right there, if you could take one day out of the week and just gather with community, that would be very helpful, because a lot of us don't have those skills. They're not really taught to us, and if they are taught, you have to go to school for them. So I feel like that would be a big help also too. Definitely gather intel, and definitely let us know what's going on in these hospitals, because there's a lot of medical racism. Medical racism's always been prevalent. That's nothing new. But especially now, you're starting to see a lot of it, especially pertaining to Black women dying in the hospital giving birth. That's why the maternal mortality rate is very high. Like you recently had a Black woman die in Brooklyn, in a hospital out in Brooklyn. You had another Black woman die out there giving birth here in the Bronx not too long ago, last year. So definitely, I feel like doctors, you guys have the privilege. You have that voice, and I understand you don't want to get blackballed. Nobody wants to get blackballed and lose their job and be kicked out their profession. But there's ways to expose systemic racism without putting yourself in the spotlight. Whether that's you getting something on a recording, giving intel, whatever it is, because our people are dying in the streets, in the prisons, and in the hospitals. So we need all hands on deck.
And also building like a unified force amongst yourselves. So like how the nurses had went on strike and stuff like that, being solidified in your own rights, what you guys are doing, so that you have your own muscle against the institution that you're under and you're working for, because of course they oppress you too, right? Like, I mean, so that's helpful, because then you feel more powerful in your own rights to be able to speak out for others when you can speak out more so for yourself.
Thank you. And similarly, and again, invite others to feel free to raise your hand or come off mute and ask any questions you may have. Similarly, I'm curious, and I feel like I have a sense of the answer to this, but because of your orientation towards institutions, but I'm curious if there is a role for institutions like big hospital systems like Montefiore, and just big hospital systems in general in any of the work that you do. Like I'm curious if you see actions that they can take or ways that they can show up and support that you could name, because there are people in this room who are in positions of leadership and will be. And as we've said, there's a spectrum of being able to advocate, both on the front lines and from different positions. And so I'm just curious if you have any sense of what you would say to an institution of how they can be supportive and work around the areas that you guys are all moving forward.
I mean, number one, we need to be able to have access, right? So if we want to have a space, we want to be able to use a space in the hospital to have meetings and convene and build. Give us that space, and that doesn't happen, right? So that's something that we would use from an institution to be able to have inside access. So we could hold and convene inside there with people. And I guess, I don't know, because an institution is an institution.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't really be part of anything that's radical because they're the problem. So I don't know how that would work. That's why we deal with doctors, because we know doctors are humans and they are us too,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
separate from the institution. So I don't think that I would burn the institution down. I really do believe in burning down. I know some people's theories is like, don't burn it down, fix what you have. No, I believe burn it down. It's so toxic that you cannot even fix. It's stained beyond repair, that we would have to build up so that we could start new autonomous groups in places and buildings that are new, that belong to us, that we can work together with. We have some medical doctors that I always say they're anonymous, you wouldn't know who they were, but they do wonderful stuff, and because of them, like, we have access to things. And I can totally see some renegade radical spots if you could just take over buildings and have different kind of medical centers. That's just the vision. But yeah, I don't know what you think, Shawn. I don't know.
I don't. It's hard. It's hard to see, like you said. It's hard to see the problem sorting itself out. because too many people benefit from it. Like you said, aside from, like you said, giving space, I don't really know, because again, they're not going to fire. You're not going to, what are you going to do? Are you going to fire the executives that push down these racist and biased ways of doing medical care? You're not, because they're in these positions of power. It's almost like trying to reform the government. It's not going to happen. The president is not going to hold himself accountable. And listen, we talk about community control, right? And in order to have community control, in order to have abolition, you got to have transformative justice. In order to have transformative justice, you got to have community control. In order to have community control, you have to have accountability. That's the key word, accountability. If there is no accountability in an institution, how are you going to reform it? It's like the police. It's like expecting the police to investigate themselves. Oh yeah, the black guy over there. Yeah, he sprinkled crack on himself and shot himself. Yeah, in the back of the head. Yeah, no. There's no real reforming these hospitals. I feel like you have to have independent, grassroots medical care, like the Black Panthers. They used to have their own. They would have their own hospitals. They would have their own medical care, their own ambulances. That's what we need, our own medical system, a grassroots one. Because like I said earlier, like with the black women dying at maternal rates, you got black and brown people dying in these hospitals, especially during COVID-19. They was just putting people on ventilators and letting them die. They didn't care. There was no field hospitals in the Bronx. That should, if COVID-19 didn't show you that the medical system does not care about black and brown people that are poor and working class, I don't know what would. So I don't see no reforming.
And I've heard stories, like I know I'm part of this other project too, but we've heard stories from people, like the most horrific stories that have happened to them inside medical settings. And then you hear some of the positive things they pull out of it. And it's always been that one doctor or that one nurse that gave a fuck and that showed concern and said something about it. So I think that there's something too, okay, the system is rotten, but you're one of the ones that's in there because you're not rotten and you're good. So you got to step up to the plate when you see these things happening, even if it's on an individual basis. It's your obligation to do that because it does make some small difference. And so the system is, burnt down.
Yeah. And I don't know if you all will know this, but some of the folks on the line and, who work in the Bronx don't necessarily live in the Bronx, but live in other boroughs. And I'm curious if there are other groups like yours, with an abolitionist perspective, that are in other parts of New York that folks who want to kind of be local to their community can support. And if so, if you want to drop it in the chat or if you want to mention it, I think it might be helpful for folks to know kind of who else is out there that y'all are working with or that y'all would suggest.
I mean, you got to shut it down. Shut it down carries the same kind of values as we do. I would say critical resistance to a degree. Critical resistance can be on the fence with some stuff. They're weird in their politics sometimes, but they are abolitionists, and they have the right idea. I don't know. We keep it safe is no longer, right, Shawn?
Not to my knowledge. I don't know if they're. I don't know.
We have Cop Watch. We also ally with them. And more will come, and I'll drop it in the chat. I just can't think right now.
That'd be great. Okay. Opening it up to folks on the line, and then I'll kind of get us close to wrapping if no other questions. But other questions, other thoughts, and for Lisa and Shawn, if there's anything else that you'd like to share, I feel like you've done a really good job of taking us through the expanse of what you are thinking about and dealing with. I'm going to ask you at the end, direct ways that we can help and think about getting engaged. Before that, just want to hold a moment to see if anyone has any questions or comments they'd like to make from the audience.
I just had a quick reflection. Thanks, Lisa and Shawn, for this talk. My name is Rahi. I'm one of the second-year internal medicine residents. Lisa, last year during our social medicine immersion month, you had come and talked to us right after the medical director from Rikers had talked to us. And it was a really interesting juxtaposition of someone kind of talking about how you can make change from the inside. And then you came in and kind of like smashed that, and it was amazing. And I just wanted to, I guess, just say thank you, because it's really like helped me envision like what my career will look like in the future, and sort of think about career opportunities that are presented to me in like a more critical way and a more radical way. That's not, they're often like presented to us as like ways to like make change, but I think having more of the abolition framework has been really helpful. So just wanted to say thank you.
Rahi, thank you for that reflection. That's really, really powerful. From the faculty or anyone else before I...
Yeah, I mean, I just also want to say thank you to both of you for being here, for sharing your work and your experience, your wisdom with us. And, you know, and thinking about what keeps you, I think you started to talk about this, you know, what keeps you going, what keeps you continuing to be in this fight and continuing to persevere through this, even when there are lots of barriers, when there are things that seem like they are insurmountable barriers. You know, as we are in, like you said, an institution, we are individuals in an institution, and often can get bogged down as well with lots of things that we experience. So I guess I'm curious as to how you would, you know, talk about things that we can tap into that maintain our ability to move and continue to be change agents.
I think for me, because I'm an atheist and I don't believe in God, I have to hang on to something. And I try to always find the common thread of humanity in things, no matter what that is, you know, because love is really what propels, right? Like I love so much that I'm willing to fight and die for it. So to me, love is the number one thing that propels me, period. You know, and there's times where I will see the goodness in someone that normally I might not fuck with, but I see that string of humanity where we are alike, and I can see that their liberation is tied to mine. So that keeps me going, because you do burnout with this, you know, and it's like sometimes, and I know you guys know it because you're in an institution, you see it all, you feel it all, it becomes very heavy. So I've learned to lean on my comrades. There's some times when I cannot move, like literally I cannot move. I'm in fetal position, and I might be like that for a couple of days, and it allows me to just rest and unplug, and then I can come back out fighting. But for me, that's what it is. It's just like looking for areas of where I can find love and humanity, that I'm willing to fight for it.
I feel like for me, it's I would say it's my beliefs a little bit. You know, also it's definitely the love of the community. And like Lisa said, seeing the humanity in everybody, and knowing that we deserve better, that we deserve to be in a world where our value is not determined by how much we reproduce, how much we make, and it's more about our character and our soul and our heart, you know, and just basically being tired of being sick and tired, you know, tired of struggling, tired of living in this ever constant fear of oppression, and, you know, just not having the autonomy to really be yourself and live your life purpose, you know. So, and on top of that, the last thing is I would say my comrades, you know, because for me, honestly, if it wasn't for them, I don't know if I would still be doing it. I'm just gonna be that real and blunt. Because this movement, like everything else, can be very stressful and very draining. So if it wasn't for them, I don't know if I'd be here talking to y'all right.
We are so glad that you're here talking with us, and we appreciate both of you so much. And I'm going to give both of y'all the last word on, you know, what do you want to leave this group with in terms of a call to action, or a reminder of something that you really want us to keep in mind. I mean, I was really moved by Rahi's comment about how your presence and your conversation changed her perspective on her career. So no pressure, but what would you leave folks with as we get ready to wrap? And I'll start with Shawn.
For me, I would just say, understand that, if you guys weren't medical providers, understand that you could easily be in your patient's shoes. That could easily be you on the receiving end, of whatever harm or whatever injury or whatever treatment they're going through. I just ask you guys to look at every patient as a human being and look at the community not as a burden, but as a blessing in disguise.
Mm.
And look at everybody as someone that you can learn from. Myself, Lisa, and other people out there. Because we're all human beings, we're all trying to survive. And, we deserve better. We deserve better than the system that we're forced to live under. And I would say definitely try to tap into local grassroots orgs, like how you guys tap in with us. In every borough, there's, just look out for, or if you're not sure, ask us and we might recommend somebody for you guys to communicate with and contact, so we can definitely build a united coalition to help our community.
Beautiful. Thank you, Shawn. Lisa.
The one thing I would say that is, if you wanted to get in touch with us, we could put you on the Eyes on You signal group, and you could kind of feel what we do. It's been a little dead. There's no obligation, no commitment. You just get on it. You kind of see some of the stuff that's going on. We talk about stuff. And then if you feel you want to do something more, that's the place to ask, and we can kind of figure out what you want to do. Just know that you all have power and just use it on a daily basis. A little bit goes a long way. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. I think you've given us a lot to think about, to consider. And I saw that April just added a quick question. Can you discuss a project where you had a successful outcome and how you achieved it? So maybe we'll just take that quickly before I wrap us. Lisa, do you want to take that quickly?
Yeah, I mean, we've done tons of stuff. We have stopped some of the gentrifiers that we have broken down meetings where they were coming in here, the developers that wanted to develop, and we shut their shit down. We shut it down. So they weren't able to do what they wanted to do because we kept showing up at their stuff with the community and shutting it down. So that was a small win, but it's a win. We've had lots of those things. We're in tenants associations. Buildings have gotten stuff, back in the day, when I was part of Community and Unity, which is another group that wasn't a nonprofit, we stopped history. You can look it up. We stopped the jail from being built in Hunts Point. We stopped a jail from being built in Hunts Point. That's huge. Not once, but twice. Not once, but twice in the same spot. You can look it up. Community and Unity stops jail from being built. So, the power of people who have an abolitionist mindset is very strong once we get our minds to it.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to add something, Shawn?
I would say one comes to mind, Idea City. There was this action, it was 2019 around the summertime, I think in Concrete Plant Park. And it was these group of gentrifiers, that they were doing a meeting, and I believe they were from the West Coast, and they was coming here to talk about gentrification plans in Hunts Point and in the South Bronx. And we got wind of it, and we went there and we shut the meeting down within 5 minutes. Like literally within 5 minutes, it was over.
And it did get violent. Someone did get punched.
Yeah, someone did, but it wasn't allegedly.
She never came back.
But it wasn't neither one of us. Yes.
And I have to say, so that none of the faculty come for me, that we are not condoning violence. We're nonviolent, all that good stuff. I love it. Thank you for these examples. We very, very, very much appreciate it. And we put your contact information, your emails in the chat. So folks who want to have more conversation and be connected can do so. We also put all the resources that you shared with us. And when we send the follow-up email, we'll add all those resources as well. And so just to wrap, we are really grateful you were all able to join us. Please send us any feedback. Again, this was a different type of round, so let us know how you received them. I've already heard some comments that folks really liked it. And if you want to see rounds like this, or if you have any ideas for others, please let us know. We are going to be meeting next month, not the fourth Tuesday, but rather on the 20th. At 4:30 to meet with someone to talk about reproductive rights in Texas. So we are excited for that conversation. We are grateful for this conversation. We learned so much, and my hope is that some of you will connect with Take Back the Bronx and really think about some of the work that we can move forward with them. Thank you all, and I will see you in a couple of weeks. Bye, everyone.